All right, welcome to this hopefully short little video in which I am going to teach you how to play Folklore using the mod I have put together on Tabletop Simulator. Now, this video, for the purposes of, or in order to keep this video short, I should say, I am going to focus specifically on just how to use the mod, and I'm going to assume that you already know how to play the game. If you want to learn how to play the game, I intend at some point in the very near future to put out a tutorial video on that, as well as a series of playthrough videos going through the first story. That said, for this video, once again, I am going to focus just on how to use the mod. And in order to do that, I'm going to begin the first story just to kind of show you how some of those mechanics work. I might fudge something here or there. I might jump ahead a little bit here or there just to kind of show you what's going on. But I'm going to use the first story in Story Journal 1 as just kind of a backdrop for how to, or a framework for how to lead this discussion into the various mechanics. Okay, this is not identical to the layout you're going to see when you load up the mod from the workshop, and that's just because I've cleaned up a couple of the assets. There are going to be a couple of pictures here showing you how to lay out stuff, and there are a couple other components that I've gotten rid of, but for the most part it's going to look like this. And what I'm going to do pretty quickly here is just get rid of a couple of assets, but I wanted to show you that they're there and how they work basically. You've got a couple of options for rolling dice in this mod. The first thing to note is you've got dice trays, dice towers, and a couple of dice roller options. Got a couple of dice roller options here. There's a tray. There will be a tower here when you first load it. And there are trays and dice rollers on each of the player areas. There are 6 player areas around the table when you load up. I've just got 2 here now because I'm just going to pretend to run a 2-player game to keep things a little simpler. But basically, in order to roll dice into a dice tower, you can drag to grab more than one object and just kind of give it a shake, and you can chuck it into the die tray and it will come up. That's a pretty typical roll for me when I'm trying to hit the bad guys. I got an 08, so that would pretty much always be a miss. You can also grab, of course, just a single die, and when you're over a die, you can hit R and it will bop up and kind of randomly roll. You can hit it a few times and make it tumble a little bit more. You can also grab a series of dice and hit R, and it will kind of keep bouncing them all up until you stop hitting R and let them drop. That all works in the dice tray or just out on the table. You can go ahead and do that too. So if you don't like the trays, you can do that pretty much anywhere and you're not going to have any difficulty. You can also drop it in the top of this dice tower and let them tumble out. And when you mouse over them, they're going to give you a result. So technically, there's no such thing as a cocked die here, because no matter what orientation it's going to have, it's going to tell you which side is the most face up, and it's not going to have any ambiguity there. So you can always hover over, get the tooltip, and see what the die result is. Or you can kind of squint at it if you want, and do a little table mental jujitsu, and call something cocked and re-roll if you feel like it. But yeah, that's pretty much how those are going to work. That said, I'm going to get rid of them because I don't particularly feel the need for having all this stuff on my table right now while I show you around. The other options are going to include a couple of dice roller, and I have these both here just because I wanted to make sure people had options for whichever they preferred. I have all the dice combos that might or might not come up in this game for the most part. There are a couple that you might roll 2d4 or 2d6. For instance, if you have a 2-handed weapon, you roll damage twice, take the higher. You might have a skill check where you roll 2 dice and take the higher or the lower result. You might have the same with a 2-hit roll. So that's pretty much why I've got these dice in here. I have a d4, a d5, and a d3. The d5 and the d3, and to extent the d2, are really there just to make convenient for instance, targeting situations when you're picking randomly between 5 characters who's affected. You have a road event where you're randomly picking a character and you've got a 5-character party. Well, why don't you click on that? And you'll get your result from this die roller in the chat box, and it will know who clicked on it and report according to the player name That's according to their nickname, which will show up in the top corner here. When everybody's logged in, they have their username showing up here. And that's what we'll report in the chat box. So if I wanted to roll, say I'm in a situation where I'm rolling with advantage, as it were. I'm rolling with maybe a silver weapon to attack a lycanthrope, right? So I roll 2 D100s and take the higher result. Well, I just roll 2 at one time, and presumably I'm going to want to take the 91 to try to hit him. And if I had disadvantage because I had to roll 1 and take the roll 2 and take the lower, then obviously I would have messed with a 7, right? And you can do the same thing. Assuming I hit with my two-handed weapon, I can roll 2d6 and see which is the highest for my damage roll. So that's how that works, and those are all just going into the chat window. However, if you're like me, certainly if you're playing solo, and possibly if you're in a group, you may not necessarily like the chat window cluttering it up. So you can always go into your configuration and turn that off and just get rid of that sucker. While you're at it, you can get rid of the tools off on the side if you don't like looking at those, and clean up your view even more. So if you don't like that, but you do like the convenience of the die roller, another option is to just have one with a printout right there on the device. And you're going to get a similar readout. It's not going to bother checking to see who you are because it's just printing right to the thing that you're already staring at, and you know you press the button. But if I want to roll a D8, it'll give me a report right there. And I can just keep rolling these as much as I like until I'm done and execute accordingly. If I want to clear the result, I can just click on that and it will go away. So a couple little tools for you. If you don't like them, I'm going to roll dice again, just because you're going to be more familiar with that. So as we go through this example, I'm going to roll dice, and as a result, we could get rid of these, but they're not really too much in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and leave them be. Now, the first thing you're going to do, obviously, is you're going to reference the storybook and the rule book a lot. These are PDFs, and a couple of things to note about these is, obviously, you have an arrow, so you can toggle through the pages. And one bit of functionality you're going to want to be aware of when you're dealing with PDFs is, obviously, you can zoom way in on these and you can read them, and you could just do that naturally. You zoom, by the way, with the mouse wheel, zoom in and out. And you can pan left and right, up and down with the WASD keys on your keyboard. And of course, if you don't like any of these control layouts, there is a way to bind new keys to different camera controls and things like that, so you can play around with that. But one thing that you can do is, obviously, if you don't like zooming in or having to zoom in, or if you want to, let's say, for instance, you're in a battle, like in the first encounter most people see in the game is the farm, right? Well, if you want to bop back and forth between the storybook and the map, but you can't really read it from that far away, it's kind of awkward to go like this back and forth. That gets tedious real fast. So here's another way you could do it. You can recognize, as I just showed you a second ago, if you hover over any object and you press the Alt key, you're going to get a zoomed in picture of that, and that, depending on your screen, is going to be big enough to read. Another option, if you're looking at a specific bit of text, you can always press M and it will zoom in on a little bit of text. And even when you're in that window, you can use your mouse window or mouse wheel to zoom in and out on that text. So you can go ahead and read like that and then go right over to the map to get it set up. Another option with a PDF is you can do a pop-out. You can tell it to lodge itself over here on one side of the screen, and you can pan over and deal with your map setup over here. And it will kind of fade out when you're not moused over it. I don't know if you can kind of see that. The background is kind of bleeding through there, but it's still readable. And then you can use that to drop your assets and stuff as you need. Now, one thing that's very, very useful to know, first of all, is there's a lot of menus such as this, and also when you're searching in bags, if you just tap the escape key really quick, they go right away. But another thing with PDFs is if you're hovering over it, and this is especially true in the story journal where, for instance, I don't know, is there one on this page? Yeah, see how it says chapter 2 on page 8? That's not really a good example. Into the hollow. Let me go back a page here. Where do we have a, yeah, so right here. Choose your path. Choice 1, go to read story moment on page 78. Story moment 78 on page 51. or 46 on 48? Well, you note really quickly you're on page 6. And if you want to go to page 51, you can just using the, it's not going to work from the number pad, but if you use the top row number keys on your keyboard and quickly type in 51, it'll bounce right to page 51. You can read that story moment, and then you can bounce right back by pressing 6 and waiting a second. The delay there is because it's waiting to see if you were typing 60 something rather than just page 6, but it will go even faster if you're on 51 and you just really quickly press 06, it'll go right to it. If you press a number like 99 that goes above the end of the book, it'll just take you to the end of the book. And if you press 00, it'll go to page 1. And that'll work when you're on this. It'll work when you're alting over it to get a zoom in, and it will also work on your pop-up. If you pop it up to screen and you mouse over it, you can hit, say, 62 and go to page 52 because that's the max. You can go to 33, you can go to 12, you can go to 7, you can go to 1, and escape to get out of it. So a couple of really quick shortcut keys there for you. And again, you've got a bunch of reference cards that come with the game, and they're going to be something that are off to the side here because you do reference them quite a lot during play. I've also added a resource here for some of the keywords so that you don't have to go hunting through the rule books to find them. I mocked up a little card here and put that off to the side as well. Other assets include the town services, references, and so forth. And yeah, basically any of those references you're going to be able to hold Alt and take a look at. None of those, because they're not PDFs, those are not going to be able to pop out onto your screen. But you can hold Alt onto them, and when you have Alt on an object, you can always mouse wheel to zoom in and out, make it bigger or smaller. Now that's going to work on a map, it's going to work on a token, and pretty much any asset you like. It'll even work on miniatures, although I don't have any of those in that game. It'll work on dice, three-dimensional objects. It'll show you one angle on them at least. Okay, so those are some of the components. Now, let's say we're about to start the story, and again, I'm assuming you know how the game works, but suppose you want to come and start a new game with your friends on Tabletop Simulator. How do you get it going? Well, the first thing, of course, you're deciding when you're starting a game is who's playing what. Let's suppose I'm starting a character or a campaign, two-player game here, and let's just say I'm going to use the Witch Hunter and the Exorcist. Well, the characters are in these bags. The characters from the base game and the expansion, there are 12 of them. You got the base game characters here, you got the expansion characters here, and of course the bags are labeled. Now you can right-click on a bag and select Search, and it will show you a breakdown of its contents. But in this case, we're going to want to pull all of the contents out of this bag. So I am instead just going to grab it one item at a time out of that bag. If I want, I can grab an object. This is actually some functionality to be aware of. If you want to draw a card from a deck, the top card, or if you want to draw an object out of a bag, you click and quickly move your mouse as though you're grabbing something and pulling it out. So I'm going to click and drag, and it will pull the Witch Hunter's card out of that bag. By contrast, if I click and hold it for a second, it will pick up the bag so that I can move the bag around. It will work the same way with a deck of cards, and this is something you want to be aware of because every once in a while you're going to have somebody who's new to Tabletop Simulator who's trying to draw a card and wind up picking up the deck. To try to minimize this, because objects do get nudged, you roll dice around the table, they might bump into something, you might accidentally move something. I do have snap points set up in this game, and as a result, objects will tend to kind of reorient themselves back. You see I'm grabbing this deck and I'm trying to move it away, but it keeps going back. And that's because there's kind of like a little magnet on the table, and the object is set to detect those magnets and gravitate towards them. So that helps keep things a little bit tidier in case some of these objects get moved around a little bit. Definitely helps with the tokens as well, because those stacks can get messy fast. But coming back to setting up the characters, I've got all the assets for the Witch Hunter in the Witch Hunter bag. So I'm going to grab his character card, and that's going to go right here at the top. And again, there's a snap point, so you don't have to worry about it. You can, with any object that you'd like, lock an object in place so that it cannot be moved by pressing the L key. Now if I try to grab it, it's not going anywhere. I can't even flip the card. I can look at it, and I can, that's with Alt. If I press Shift while I'm pressing Alt, it will show me the other side of the card. So that's one way to, even with a locked asset, see what's on the other side of it. But I can always unlock it, and then you press F to flip a card. So I could do that, and frankly, there's not a whole lot going on over here, so I usually just leave these unlocked in the event that I need to flip them. Although you're a ghost rarely enough that you can lock these in place without worrying about it too much. Then I've also got the character card. These get flipped quite a bit during gameplay because you're going back and forth between your special town services for your character on the one side and your character progression and special abilities on the other. So I usually leave these unlocked. But of course you can do what you like. The next item that's going to come out is the deck of cards. That is the starting equipment for your character that comes in the form of cards. So we've got his ability cards. Let me zoom in here so you can see this more easily. He's got Tracker, he's got In the Scope, and he's got his crossbow, which when I put over here will snap, right? These don't snap, and that's because you usually have 3 or 4 or 5 cards, and you probably want to lay them all out. So I did not put snap points here because that actually gets irritating rather than helpful. But when you have one asset in any one slot over here, I've got some snap points set up there as well. I've got a couple of snap points for some of the tokens up here, but item tokens, if you've got 2 torches, a wooden stake, and a couple of bandages, I don't think you want them all in a stack. You probably want to scatter them out or spread them about, or maybe array them down here to keep track of your tokens. That might be a little bit better way to go. So there's no snap point right there. He will start with a set of bandages per his card. He does not start with a ritual or a prayer, so we don't have to worry about that. And then he's going to have 2 character sheets, kind of a top and a bottom, or a front and a back. And rather than have one card that flips, I just put it in 2 cards that you can then lock in place. And what's cool about these is these are editable. So you can go into your card here, click on a space. When you have that T, that means it's a text box. You can kind of maybe see a cursor sometimes, but you can type your name. I'm just going to call this guy Witchy Mick Witcherson. And he's a witch hunter. When I choose his focus, I'm going to add that to the, okay. He's a witch hunter. What focus does he have? He is going to have, let's just say he goes with Inquisitor. Okay, so I'm going to go into the text box, and I'm going to say W Hunter Inquisitor. Okay, locked and loaded. Now with text boxes, one thing to bear in mind with Tabletop Simulator, having done this a lot myself, when you're in a text box, you feel like you're done typing, return is not going to enter your information. If you have the text box open, it's actually going to open your text box, if anything, your chat window. So when you start pressing WSAD to try to move, it might start typing rather than actually moving you. So remember, once you're done typing into a box, to type out of it again and click somewhere where you don't have a field so that you can actually move again. You're also going to be able to set your character number over here. You can say this guy's player number 1. And you can you've got a counter here for infections if they start running up on you. You've got these check boxes, and each one of these you can actually click on to get a little X, and that will mark your kind of temporary conditions and so forth, right? So he's brave and lucky, but he's wanted, and he has that blue marker. Who knows what that sucker's doing right now, right? The sheets in the bags do come preloaded with the base stats from the characters, so you don't have to put those in. But of course, those are going to start being modified by equipment. If you wanted to, if you had an item that had might rating, you might denote that here under items and abilities and so forth. And his equipment here is right here. And then he's got bandages listed under consumables. He's capable of using prayers, so that is checked. And of course, he has his starting and special abilities listed over here. Ghost stats down here. And of course, any of these can change during play. And what's nice about this is you keep good good notes on your sheet, you've got a save game option. So you can click on that. You can save your game. You could have 3, 4, 5 different campaigns running with separate save files, and everything's good. So that's a nice feature. But the Witch Hunter is now set up and ready to go. Now let's suppose we want to add the Exorcist to that. Same situation. He's going to pull out his cards. And the setup's really quick when you know what you're doing. He's going to have his deck of cards, his Aspergillum's going in his right hand. His 2 cards are coming over here. He's going to have some holy water. He's going to have a set of bandages. And he's going to have his 2 character sheets. And they're going to go right here, and I'm going to lock them in place. I'm going to lock that in place. None of this is locked because they might move. I'm not going to bother naming him, but that's going to work pretty much the same way. There's nothing really left to do, except he's a prayer user. He does start with a prayer. Now, there's no prayer in his bag because it's a randomly selected prayer. So what you're going to want to do is for any of these decks here that are randomized, now the equipment pack, I believe I have, pretty sure I have, yeah, alphabetized. So you don't want to shuffle that necessarily, although even if you do, if you know what you're looking for, you can always type in the name of an item that you're looking for, which is a nice bit of functionality. So yeah, let's take a minute to talk about decks of cards here. When you go into a deck of cards, you can hit R on top of a deck of cards, and that will shuffle the deck. I'm not going to shuffle this because I'd like to keep it alphabetized, but artifacts too usually are appointed. You can get a random artifact, so I am going to shuffle that. The abilities you don't necessarily need to shuffle, but the prayers, the rituals, and the companions you're going to want to shuffle. The tarot cards you're going to want to shuffle. Okay. So again, to get a card off the top, you're going to grab a card off the top and just pull quickly. Otherwise, if you linger there with your hand, you're going to grab that deck. You can always put that right back, but basically you're going to draw a card. While you're holding it or after you put it down, you're going to hit F to see what it is. So you can do it while you're holding it. You can flip it, or you can let go of it. If you hit F over here, it's not going to do anything. When you mouse over it, it will flip. All right. And you notice I had the Oil of Exorcism. If I randomize this, it's very unlikely to get Oil of Exorcism again. Soaring Halberd, okay? Much better item, by the way. But yeah, he is coming back to our Exorcist. If I want to set up the Exorcist, I'm going to pull a random prayer. So I randomly shuffle that and drag a card off and flip it to see what it is. Holy Crusade. Okay. Now, notice in doing this, and I'm just going to drop this over here in his Mystic area. And under his Mystic Arts, I'm going to go ahead and write Holy Crusade, as opposed to the unholy one, I guess. Right? So yeah, that's pretty much how that works. A couple of little pointers here, though. As you go through the game, you're going to find that panning back and forth like this gets a little old. I mean, you start to get used to it after a while, but it can get old. So one very important bit of functionality you are definitely going to want to know is the saved camera angles. Okay, so let's suppose you are running, let's suppose you're even running it solo. Suppose you have a solo game going and you're running the Witch Hunter and the Exorcist. Okay, well, I'm going to be looking at the character areas a lot. I'm going to be looking at the main map a lot, and I'm going to be looking at the encounter area a lot. And those are pretty much the only areas I'm going to look for. There might be some circumstances where I want a higher up view. So let's say I want 4 kind of areas that I'm going to be looking at all the time. Well, I hit Control 1, and that's going to save a camera angle and call it Camera 1. And I'm doing that because that's player number 1. Player number 2, or character number 2, I'm going to say Control 2, and it will save that camera angle. I can then zoom out and I can go over and get whatever angle I think is going to be very useful or most useful for the main map. Okay, and I'm going to come this way a little bit for a moment. For the reason you're going to see in just a second. And I'm going to hit Control 3 here. And then I'm going to pan over here to take a look at the kind of the encounter area with all its associated tokens and enemies. Plus there's an area over here for skirmish. Plus I've got my dice available. Easy reference to the story journals, etc. And I'm going to say Control 4 right here. And if I want a wider view on everything, in case I lose track of some component or something like that, I can choose whatever I like. And if I do Control 0 now, The reason I would do Control 0 is that, well, let me just kind of show you how this works, okay? If I could be way over here, and if I decide, oh, I really need to see my witch hunter, I'm not going to press Control 1 because that would save the new camera angle. Instead, I'm going to do Shift 1, Shift 2, Shift 3, Shift 4. Oh my gosh, isn't that convenient? You know what's really cool about this, on top of this, is you can do this while holding cards. So suppose you just drew an item for your guy. You say, oh good, my witch hunter just got the soaring halberd. Isn't that awesome? You can pan while you're carrying it, or you could zoom way out so that you can see it and you could drag it over, or while you're zoomed way in to look at your item deck, because you love those pretty little graphics, right? You zoomed way in, you pick it up, Shift 1, boom, and I'm still holding that sucker. Okay, and I can put that right into his backpack and label that right over here. So that's pretty convenient right there. And the wide angle shot, maybe the overall thing, or maybe it's just the one you want to be most convenient. If you hit spacebar, you will snap to camera 0, which is, again, that one you're going to save when you hit Control 0. So you can set that to be, you know, if you're in a multiplayer game and you're only controlling one character, maybe the place you're looking most often is your play area. So maybe that's what you want to be your Control 0, because again, you just hit spacebar and you snap right back to it. Coming back to, well, let's kind of imagine we've got our characters. We're now set up. Okay, he doesn't actually have the soaring halberd. You don't start with that. That'd be nice. Let me clear that real quick. Okay, let me shuffle the items. So let's suppose we're set up now and we're ready to begin the story. Okay, so we go ahead and pop out the story journal. We go to page 1. Here we go. For some reason it is not. It used to work. Okay, not sure why it's not doing that. Oh, because that is one. I'm telling it to go to page 1 and it is on page 1. It considers the cover page 1. Okay. So that's the table of contents. We don't need that. Everything changes, okay? And of course we note our usual requirements here. So we're going to have all that information in our mind, just like we would at table. And we read through the story. And I'm not going to read through the story too much to try to spoil anybody's story, although presumably you know it by now. But it's going to work pretty much like you would expect it at table. And that's the virtue of the tabletop simulator, is it really does simulate playing the game on a table for the most part. You just have to learn some keyboard shortcuts for how to do it, and whoever puts the mod together has to get the assets in place. That's about it. But you would read through this and you come to the first skill check, right? One character must try to pass speech 8. Okay, so I know that. I'm going to escape out of that, and I'm going to say, okay, my exorcist is the one who's got speech, so he's going to roll. Okay, well, I could use my D100 right here. This is going to output to the chat window. If you didn't like that, if you wanted it to be more personal, you could replace that with this one that reports on the card itself. So you can always get rid of this. It is locked in place, but you unlock it by pressing L. If you wanted to just get rid of it, you do need to unlock it first. But then if you're mousing over, it's not going to work if you're on a button. But if you're on the object and not on a button, you can press delete, and it will just go away. Again, that will only work on an unlocked asset. But suppose I wanted this guy right here, I can unlock it, and then I can press Control C to copy it, and I can press Control V over here to get it back, and then I can lock it in place. And now I've got a different one that is going to be just for the exorcist. And again, this is great for solo play. Suppose he's rolling his skill check. He needs an 8 on speech. He's got a +1, so that means he needs a 7 on speech. You got a 1. Oh well, not every die goes as planned, right? So you got a 1, he failed that speech check. So now we flash back up to the story journal over here, and we see what happens as a result of that. The highwaymen do not leave peacefully, so we have to skirmish with the highwaymen, okay? So that is going to happen over here. And what we've got here, obviously we've got a battle map here. We've got all the associated tokens arrayed out near the battle map. but we're not in an encounter, we're in a skirmish. The way you're going to do this is you're going to find a deck of cards here. This has all your enemies, both the regular and the nasty versions of them. And then your afflictions are in a separate deck here. For encounters, you've got tokens and standees off to the side, but you've got a skirmish counter right here, or you have this skirmish marker if you prefer. But you're going to go ahead and you're going to search the deck. You can draw randomly, but it's going to draw off the top. So what you're going to want to do, because this is alphabetized, is search the deck for the Highwaymen. And you're going to want to take note of where it is when you drag it out. And then hit escape so that it goes away. And then you're going to want to put it back in alphabetic order so it's easier to find next time. That's my recommendation. Of course, you don't necessarily have to do that. But then, per the rules for a skirmish, zooming in on this card, if we're doing a two-player game, we roll a d4 to see how strong the encounter is. So we can roll a d4 on here, we can roll a d4 and have it output to the chat, or we just grab an actual d4 and roll that sucker, shake it around a little bit, and drop it, shake it and throw it. And again, there's going to be a hover over it. You could select it and hit your R to really randomize it like that. Hit a 3, shake it and roll it, however you want to do it. Okay, you could come down to your dice tray, you could have a dice tower over here, however you want to do it. So let's suppose, okay, I rolled a 1. I'm going to toggle that counter up to 1, and I'm going to have at it. Well, the Highwayman attacks with a dusk level difficulty at a 0. So he's just going to roll a percentile die and try to hit me. Okay, here's my percentile dice right here. He rolls 1 to attack both of my characters. He rolls a 45. I'm pretty sure with no modifier that's going to hit both my guys, but I can go double check real quick. He's got a 38 defense. He's got a 36 defense. So that 45 does hit me, unfortunately. Okay. As a result, each of my guys is going to lose d4, but fortunately it was not over an 85. Another thing, though, to bear in mind is its skirmish counter is on 1. So he has -1 damage and -5 might. Unfortunately, the -5 is not enough to make a difference to me, but it will mean 1 less damage on this die roll. So I'm going to roll dice for my 2 characters. Whoops, accidentally. That's one thing you want to be careful of. I hit Control 1 instead of Shift 1 by accident. I actually might recommend trying to rebind some of these key bindings, but I don't think you can change the camera bindings for these controls in particular, unfortunately. So be careful. Make sure you hit Shift and not Control when you're going to cameras. But damage to my Witch Hunter would then be a 4, apparently. And I forgot to do this at character setup. The first time out, you're going to have to do a little bit of clicking to get him set up. But I set these up as counters rather than text boxes because in-game, I find it to be more convenient. So he loses 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's done. Then we come over to the Exorcist. His starting Vita is 22. And his power points are also 5. Okay, and then I roll his damage, and he got a 3. Okay, so he loses 3, 2, 3. Actually, he lost 2 because it's d4 minus 1. And this guy only lost 3 because it's d4 minus 1. Okay, back over to the combat area. Now my guys get a chance to attack him, and only one of them needs to hit. So my Witch Hunter is going to roll his attack. He has no bonuses other than his native +4. And what am I trying to hit? I'm trying to hit defense of 42. So I need a 38 or better given my +4. And I get a 60, which means that guy is taken care of, so I can claim my rewards. Rewards for this are going to be coin value of 4 for each guy. So he's going to get 4 coins. And my Exorcist is going to get 4 coins as well. The reason these are text boxes rather than counters is you often get, 40 or 50 lore or coins at a time, and you don't want to be doing all those clicks all the time. So it's less convenient to do that. Then each of these characters is going to roll a d10 to see if they can get a 10, because if they get a 10, they get an item. You get a 9, which is close but not quite good enough. And you got an 8. which is not good enough. So no items from that skirmish, but we did get 8 coins and suffered relatively minor damage. I'm going to take the time to put this guy back right where he belongs so I can find him more easily next time out. And then I just hit escape, and that's your skirmish. All done willy-nilly. Okay. Then we come back and we go to the storybook, and you can actually use your mouse wheel to toggle through pages as well. And here's where you're going to have your skirmish table. You have a story skill check. Each character would roll a die. You, at this point, are familiar with how dice roll in this framework, so I'm not going to show you any of that. Let's suppose we go through the rest of this, and I showed you how you do the story moment events and so forth. So if we chose to give the urchin a spare coin down here at the bottom of the page, will you give the urchin some spare coin? Choice 1, one character may give the urchin a coin. If you have one, the character to do so must read story moment 25. Okay, the exorcist, of course, is benevolent. So we're going to do that, and we're going to go to story moment 25 on page 46. So I'm going to type 46 here. I'm going to see story moment 25, and I find out, ooh, I get the blue story marker. So on the exorcist, I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to plop the story marker there for a visual. I'm also going to a sheet, and I'm going to check blue story marker to make sure that's recorded. And that's pretty much how that's going to go until we get to our encounter. Suppose we go to help the farmer, and we wind up with that encounter there where we're skirmishing with, or encountering, a bunch of wolves. Okay, well, the components here, you've got character standees and you've got character tokens. If you're doing 3D, you're probably inclined to want to use standees, so I can grab the exorcist standee. He's going to be right here. And I can grab the witch hunter standee. He's right here. And those guys are off to the races. And then I can go ahead and grab my card for the rabid wolves and drop them over here. I'm going to remember to flip that so that we are dealing with the encounter side rather than the skirmish side. And then I'm going to go ahead into the creature standees, and I'm going to search there. And these are labeled, but they're not alphabetized, but I can always start typing rabid, and it's going to find that real quick. And I'm going to drop one of those. I'm going to hit escape, and then I'm going to copy these a couple of times. What I actually like to do is copy it 4 times, and then go back into that bag and put it right back, because if I forget to do so, and I delete these tokens after the encounter, then what's going to happen is I don't have that standee anymore, and I'm going to have to go find it, which is kind of annoying. But you can zoom in pretty well on this map, and you get a couple of options here. Obviously, the hit points are going to be tracked for your 2 characters on your character sheets over here, so you're not necessarily worried about that in combat. But how do you track the hit point totals for the enemies who are located? It's approximately something like this in the fight, and then you have the stick man is something like over here, and then I think you have a search marker over here. So he's back this way 1 spot, he's over 1 spot, and yes, those are positioned as they should be. Okay, so that pretty much is the layout, and you would go to town on that battle as usual. But as is a problem at the table, what do you do with the hit points, right? You can always grab a scrap of paper. It's harder to do when you're online and the other person's in Canada, when you're in Toledo. So you're going to want that shared image, and ideally you want it right here on the screen. So one thing I did provide is Vita boxes for the enemies so that you can have them either off to the side or right there on the map. With a 2-player game, these guys are going to have 13 hit points, so I'm going to put that there. And then I'm just going to Control-C and Control-V those guys. And then the only thing is when I move the token, I'm going to want to move the hit point counter along with it. So then it's just a matter of rolling dice for who goes first, and I like to grab a red die for the bad guys and a black die for me, and just roll to see who goes first. In this case, it is the bad guys. So they would get to go, and they would have at it. Their movement is stride of 5. So this guy would go to the closest. These guys are equidistant because diagonals are one space. So I might want to randomly select who I'm fighting. I could roll a d3 and divide by, 1 to 3 is my witch hunter and 4 through 6 is my exorcist, but it's a whole lot easier to just do something like this. Witch hunter it is. So he goes over here next to my witch hunter and rolls an attack. His might at dusk level is -5. So we see what he rolls. And it's a 46, -5 is 41. I know his defense is in the 30s, so that's going to be a hit. It's a hamstring, so he's going to lose d4 plus 1 Vita. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that. It's 2 plus 1, so he loses 3 Vita. And he is immobilized unless he resists that. So let me pop over here. He loses 3 Vita. And then I check. I've got the statuses over here for convenience sake. Immobilized is resisted with trickery. And ecology is the ecology check there. Sorry, the trickery check there is 5 per the card. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that. See what I get. I got a 5. No modifier, but I think that's good enough. So he is, as it turns out, not immobilized. Thank goodness. The other wolf can kind of come over here, and he will go after the closest person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, he can reach me. I'm going to move that with him. And he, of course, can only reach the exorcist, so that is the person he attacks. And he rolls a 92, which is definitely good enough to hit. And that is take down. So he is going to lose 3 Vita and get pushed 1. And so I would go down here and do 1, 2, 3 Vita. But then he is pushed 1, which means he's pushed, boom, into the witch hunter. You can't move the witch hunter anywhere. So as a result, I think per the rule, if I understand it, they both take a d4 damage for getting pushed into each other. So the witch hunter will take 3 damage, and the exorcist will take 3 damage. So I'll bop over and do that. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're already in not the best shape, but it's now our turn to fight back once this guy moves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fortunately, the fence got in his way a little bit. And then, of course, now I'm just off to the races in terms of what do I want to do? Who do I want to attack? How do I focus fire? Do I want to go after the stick man? Do I want to try to make my way to the search marker? How do I heal? Who do I heal? In what order? And so forth. But that is the game. That is not the mod. There's really nothing to that other than following the instructions on the card and rolling some dice, which by now you know how to do. So again, the tokens are all here. The characters and their stuff is in here. The only other thing that really is not necessarily obvious that we haven't talked about, for one thing, is party order. When you're going on the overland map, you're counting spaces, and I have replaced the pawn with this marker just because it's, I find, a little bit more visible, especially if, and this is how I sometimes will play, it's up to you, but if you press P in in Tabletop Simulator, you will be able to switch between a couple of different camera options, and one of them is top-down, which makes some of these components a whole lot easier to deal with, and in other respects, not so much. But certainly if you're doing a top-down, that little white pawn is really not visible at all. Even if you're 3D, if you're at a steeper angle, it's really hard to see. So I kind of liked the compass marker here, so that's what I've got going on here. But you're also going to want at the start of your game to set up your, take your witch hunter, where are you? Witch hunter, and your, in this case, exorcist, and plop their cards down here so that you can track who's party leader. You can drag that token and flip it night and day as needed by the dictates of the story, which of course is relevant for road events and other things. There's really not a lot more to that than this. Road events are going to be handled the way you would expect. You draw a card, you flip it over, you look at it. Whether it's day or night, is going to determine what you're going through, and then you're going to plop it over here in the discard. With the off-road events, you're going to need to get that top card off, because that's obviously a cover because they're two-sided cards, and then just pull that card off and then replace that really quick. And you can look at that, make your choice, flip your card, deal with that, and again put it into the discard here. Similarly for the other events here. All right. A couple of other bits of functionality in the mod. There are some other rule books and stuff. I haven't really cleaned this up too much, but there are some other rule books and storybooks in here. So Dark Tales is in here, Storybook 3 is in here, and so forth. First edition of the rulebook is in there, if for some reason you want that. The Boon Token Bag. I have a little note here just to indicate it as a visual. This you don't really want to move. There are 10 Boon tokens in the base game. There are 10 Boon tokens in this bag. You press R to randomize the contents, and then you pull out of it just as you would pull out of these bags here, or as you would pull out of a deck of cards to get a random boon. Okay, and then when you've used them, you can throw them back in there and just hit R as much as you like to keep shuffling that bag. So that's there just to help you shuffle the tokens, which otherwise would not be random. One other thing is, if you are playing in a top-down format, obviously the tokens here are really not easy to see. You can mouse over them and press Alt, and you'll be able to see who they are, but that's a little awkward to do. And as a result, I have included tokens instead. So one option would be for the Rabid Wolves to go ahead and just use these guys instead, which are much more visible in a top-down format. So you could use that as well. And I've done the same thing with the characters. So you could grab the Exorcist and the Witch Hunter and use those as well. And again, much more visible. Green and red, good guys and bad guys, and so forth. Okay. I think the one last bit of functionality, the afflictions work the same way. You search for their cards and draw them out, and you search for their tokens over here. And you've got stacks for the doors. You've got the darkness token, which is just a reminder anyway, but it's here, and you can flip it and get the instructions on the back, just like in the base game. And these are all on snap points as well. So if you pull the log off a little bit, it'll keep snapping back unless you drag it far enough. There are a couple of places in the game where you have compass tokens that get randomized, and what you're going to want to do is, you've got those compass tokens, you've got them in a stack, but it's not random when you pull them out. So what you're going to want to do is go ahead and go into components, go into tools, and just grab a bag, any bag, throw it down there, grab the token, the compass tokens that you want, and put them into that bag. And then you can shuffle them up and drag them out randomly. And they're going to come out not in order necessarily. Okay? And then when you're done, you can just throw them back there, and they will snap into a nice little pile for you. If you want to keep that shuffle bag out there, you can, of course, feel free, but when you're done with it, you can always delete it and get a new one when you need that as well. Yeah, so the only other thing here really is the map itself. It's locked in place, as are all these cards, so I'm not going to have a risk of grabbing any of those. So let me just grab all these components and move them off to the side real quick. So I can show you that if I hit L on the map, it is now something that I can pick up and move around. There is a snap point here, and the maps are all sized so that they should fit in this area. But I've got the combat grids from the base game here, and I can search this, and they're also in order. So if you alt over this, this is FC01A. So I'm going to put that in front of 01B right here. And then if I need any other, I somehow got a search token in there. I don't know how. If I need for any other reason to grab anything else, any other map, so suppose I go into the tunnel in the next location. I believe where is it? It's this one is the next one I need. I just drop that down there. I'm going to make sure I lock it in place so that when I'm moving tokens around, I don't accidentally grab the map and move it, because that can be disruptive. So I'm going to lock that in place, and then I can start populating it with enemies and characters as needed. That should be everything you need to know and more in order to run map tool, sorry, I keep saying that, in order to run Folklore using Tabletop Simulator. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope you found it informative, and I hope you will take the time, if you like this game, to give this a shot. Tabletop Simulator is very convenient, and I actually really enjoy playing it here just because of the save function. It really saves on setup and breakdown, and it's a really, really great way to enjoy this wonderful game that, as much as I love it, can be a little bit of a pain to get out and get set up, and can be hard to, there's just a lot of writing and erasing to keep track of stuff between sessions and so forth, and it can be hard to manage at a table. So my inclination is to want to leave it set up at a table for long periods of time, but that's not always feasible in a house with kids and other things going on. Spouse who's not amenable to having tables taken up for long periods of time, and the like. So this is a nice option. You can port it around on your laptop and fire it up on your lunch break at work. Play a couple of rounds, save it, and just come back whenever you got a moment. So it's really convenient. And then of course you have the added functionality of being able to connect with people really easily. I'm focused on the framework here, the mod, rather than Tabletop Simulator as a whole. So I'm not going into how you connect with friends. There's plenty of ways to find out how that goes, but you can very easily connect with friends and have them connect in and play this game with you. It's really, Tabletop Simulator makes it really easy. The one downside of it is they do all have to have a copy of the program Tabletop Simulator in order to run the mod themselves, so that they can move around and zoom around and interact with objects and roll their own dice. But if you really are strapped for cash, or if somebody else doesn't want to drop $20 on Tabletop Simulator just to play a board game with you, well, share your screen in Zoom, and off you go. You can roll the dice for them, and you can actually have a game that way. And I've done it, and it works. So just bear all that in mind. It's a very, very useful tool. This is a fantastic game, which is why I put all this effort into putting this together. If you have any comments on what you'd like to see changed or improved upon or added, please let me know. I don't think I mentioned this, but I might have mentioned it. I have the 56 character-specific items for the base characters. So these are the items that they can purchase specifically in town for them. Things like the silver crossbow for the witch hunter, the fenestrated morning star for the exorcist, the prayer beads, that sort of thing. They all have cards in here, right? So if I wanted to find the prayer beads, so I'm better at healing, I've actually got a card for that mocked up. Now it's not very pretty, and it does not match the actual equipment pack that you can purchase from Greenbrier Games. But that's because I don't have it, so I don't have scans of the artwork. If I did, that'd be great. If somebody wants to give me that, please, I would love to have the actual artwork in here. I just don't have access to it right now. And I don't know that I'm going to spring for those cards, just because, I mean, I can get by without it even at table. So I don't necessarily need it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've got here. I do not yet have those mocked up for the expansion characters, but I hope to shortly. So look for that in the future. And again, if you have art assets for any of that could speed that along, they'd be greatly appreciated. But yeah, that's it. Hope you are able to play this and have fun with it and enjoy this really, really wonderful game. I've shared it with a bunch of friends. I've had at least 2 of them purchase it because I was able to show them the game. So help spread the love, help spread this game, and let's get the creators a couple of royalties while we're at it. All right, thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the flip side. Happy gaming. Take care.